Have you ever been on a ghost train? And I don't mean those industrial movie themed rides. I mean those traditional fairground rides that are usually built into black boathouses. If your answer is yes, then you'll know just how cheap and nasty some of those things can be. For me, I always felt a wave of nostalgia wash over me whenever I rode one. That was until I rode the ghost train at Flamingo Park. Flamingo Park is a small seaside funfair located in Hastings, England. It's quaint, yet it manages to attract hundreds upon hundreds of tourists each year. I myself was one of those tourists. A little backstory. My name is Eddie, I'm 22, I live alone, and I have been going all over the UK searching for small nostalgic thrills. And yes, said thrills are in the form of childish rides, fairground arcades, and wacky funhouses. It has always been a childhood hobby, and it carried itself into my early adult life. I'll never forget what happened on that August day. I had a route set in my mind. First, I was going to ride the Dodgems, then explore the Green Jungle Maze, and finally I was going to finish off with the ghost train. I casually made my way up to the kiosk and brought £10 worth of ride tokens. The lady behind the counter took the £10 note that I'd given her and gingerly placed it into the cash box. I was then handed one of those cash bags with 20 tokens, 2 tokens for £1. After I'd ticked off all the activities on my imaginary bucket list, I approached the old, decrepit jet black building. I deposited 3 ride tokens, 3 per person, to the man operating the ride. The first thing I was greeted with were the 2 uneven wooden doors in front of my cart. Painted on the doors was a face split in 2. On one of the doors, the face was all skull and bone. On the other, it was covered in skin and muscle. I had to admit, it looked pretty graphic, especially for a children's ride. Next, I was greeted by the male worker who gave me a cliché safety briefing. Stay in the cart, keeping your hands, arms, feet and legs inside at all times. After that, I was pushed into the pitch black darkness beyond the 2 wooden doors. When I say the cart moved slowly, I mean slowly. Slower than any other ghost train I'd ever been on. The first thing that caught my attention was how child-friendly the first room was. The whole room was covered in green, red and yellow UV paint with a buzzing purple UV light beaming overhead. I could see a creepy looking skeleton and a few ghosts painted on the far wall. Whilst the ride appeared to be moderately child friendly, there was one thing out of place. There was this uneasy feeling that I couldn't place. Something about the room I was in felt off. After a short while, my cart made its way into the second room. This room was slightly more graphic. Directly in front of my cart was a realistic looking prisoner in an electric chair. He threw himself back and forth whilst making muffled pleading noises. This was unsettling, but still fairly good for a small, low-budget ghost train. The third room was where things started to get weird. In this room, a clown pressed itself up against a metal gate, whilst an animatronic lifted its head out of the socket. That wasn't what was weird though. What was weird were the random dolls scattered all over the floor. At first, I thought they were just part of the ride and thought nothing of it, but they were all in seemingly good condition. The fourth room was the one I'll never forget. The ride itself was pretty dark, so I was tempted to pull out my phone for some light. That's when I heard her. I don't know if it was just my mind playing tricks on me, but I could hear a faint, whimpering sound. It almost sounded like crying. I assumed it was a passenger in another cart, either in front or behind me, but it was close. Apart from the distant whimpering, the room was quiet. Suddenly, the crying changed, and it turned into a deep, raspy laugh. The laughing was low, too low to be a person. I thought that it must have been a hi-fi speaker system, and deep down, I was praying to myself that it was. The laughing then ceased, and my cart slowly started to move again. The only odd thing about this room was that it seemed to go on forever. No props, no lights, nothing. The only sound now were the cart's wheels rumbling across the floor. It took me a little while to notice, but I realised that something else was wrong too. I would say it took about 30 seconds until I placed what it was. My cart wasn't moving by itself. It was being pushed. I only realised when I heard heavy breathing other than my own directly behind me. I hoped to God that it was just the worker messing with me, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. "Who's there?" I sheepishly asked. What followed next was something I'll never forget. The cart suddenly stopped, as did the breathing behind me. Taking its place were the sounds of light footsteps circling around my cart. I wanted to pull out my phone there and then for some light, but I was paralysed with fear. The room around me was pitch black, but I could visualise what my face must have looked like in that moment. I then felt someone get into the cart with me. Their face felt like it was merely inches away from my own. Not only that, but I could distinctly feel a warm breath on my neck. I don't know what it was, but something caused me to regain conscious movement. I shoved my hand into my right trouser pocket, fumbled around for my phone, and pulled it out without any hesitation. I turned on the phone's torch and shined it in front of me. There was nothing, just a track that seemed to go on into an endless void. I then shined my phone to where the breathing was coming from, and I froze. The face, that was merely inches away from my own, was absolutely terrifying. It was a woman of average height. Her wavy brown hair hung in clumps down either side, but her face is what still haunts me to this day. It was hollow. Her whole face was like one big mouth. No eyes, no nose, and no ears. I practically dropped my phone when I saw a dark green liquid begin to pool on the inside of her face. The thick liquid oozed down either side, and I could feel myself on the verge of vomiting. Still holding my phone, I looked down with the beaming light and saw that her hand was gingerly placed on my right leg. Her fingers were all wrong. Where her thumb should have been was an index finger, and where her middle finger should have been was a thumb. None of her fingers appeared to be in the right place. I looked back up and gasped as her face was now a mere inch away from my own. I thrashed around violently, screaming until eventually I passed out. The next thing I knew, I was outside with paramedics all around me. Ride workers, parents and children all stood around me, passing strange looks at each other. I felt slightly embarrassed, but after what I'd just seen, I couldn't do anything. Apparently, one of the workers had heard me shouting and came in to find me curled up on the floor next to my cart, which had broken down. I was rushed to a hospital later on that day, and after a few hours, they found no issues regarding my physical health, so needless to say, I was sent home. It has been years since this happened, and I've only just plucked up the courage to talk about this now. I was always scared to tell people, fearing they might call me crazy. I would have agreed with the notion that I was crazy, had it not been for the dark green stains on my clothes. It doesn't look like this has happened to anybody else, but just to be safe, don't ride the Flamingo Park ghost train.